welcome to my presentation. My name is Johanna Stahl. I'm going to talk about teaching with impact, that is finding out what works and what doesn't work in education based on findings from evidence-based education and visible learning studies. As Nelson Mandela once put it, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Now, that is very nice to know, but then the question is, what could be education, and especially what education would be most powerful? That is, what is good education? And in that aspect, you need to ask, how do you reach that goal? So how do you achieve good education, meaning how do you teach with that goal, and how do you teach with an impact, impact being good education. And then the next question might be, what is impact when you speak about impact in education? Would that be achievements, student performance as measured with grades? Would it be test scores like standardized assessment scores, school tests? Or would you measure achievement or impact of teaching by school success, or maybe individual success? Like, what is more important? What do you use to actually tell people what is good education and how you should teach to get there? So a lot of researchers thought about, what is good education? How do you get there? How do you teach with an impact? How do you get your learners to actually take along what you wanted to give to them in, with regards to knowledge, to skills, maybe even to characters. And some people are a little bit skeptical in that regard. Mr. Jinnett said, teachers are expected to reach unattainable goals with inadequate tools. The miracle is that at times they accomplish this impossible task. So the question is, how do they accomplish that, and what makes them successful or not successful? What sets successful and effective teachers apart from others? Or what is actually effective teaching? Does it depend on the person? Does it depend on circumstances? So here a number of researchers looked into those questions, and in recent 10 years, a number of studies or books with impact were published talking about teaching with impact. Two of these books were written by John Hattie. He has been writing on visible learning. I will talk about more of that later. Some other books, for instance, one by Robert Marzano, Classroom Instruction That Works, are more geared towards the teacher itself. But I will mainly tap into those first two books, Visible Learning for Teachers. Why do I do that? Hattie did a very influential mega study, as you would call it, on all kinds of possible influences on student achievement. That is, here he said impact, teaching impact can be measured by student achievement. He analyzed over 800 meta-analyses, which themselves combined 50,000 studies, and looked at more than 200 million students. And of course, with that much data, you get a lot of effects, but there are a lot of methodological drawbacks as well. However, what Hattie boiled everything down to was finding out what individual traits or practices would work and which wouldn't. And I will shortly take you through his lessons on strategies or teaching characteristics that actually work, that have an impact on students, and that increase student achievement and therefore learning outcomes. So Hattie looked at a total of 138 factors grouped into parental, family factors, student factors, something like gender would be a student factor, school factors, curriculum characteristics, teacher characteristics, and especially a big group of factors was centered around instruction, like instruction technologies, methods, didactics, that kind of things. And he asked what has an impact size, and he defined that as an effect size, a statistic measure of greater 0.4. I could explain that now, but I think time is precious, so I'll just leave it to you to believe me that I have done my homework here. So Hattie looked at all of these 138 factors, and what he found out what was most effective in teaching and for learning strategies were the following items mentioned here. So for instance, teacher clarity. Reciprocal teaching would be actually the student teaching or the student explaining what he needs to learn or what he was learning, so that the student gets into the teacher role and the teacher gets into the student role, meaning that he learns from the students. So it's much more a balanced role picture there. What is also very important for Hattie was feedback on any form, feedback to the teacher, feedback to the student. Mastery learning would be learning to increase competencies and not just to reach a certain level of achievement, like a very good grade. So actually mastery learning asks students to reflect on where they are and then to look for the next learning step or learning level, the next level that they need to master. That goes hand in hand with something called metacognitive strategies. That means knowing what I already know, being able to evaluate oneself, being able to evaluate learning processes, being able to evaluate own competencies, but also being able to see failures and successes and to correctly attribute them. Those are some of the factors that really work best when it comes to teaching and to learning. I just picked out a few that might have not been as clear as some others here. So to sum this up, we can actually fill 3 different groups of category of criteria here on what works best. So the first would be an evaluative approach that is mostly driven by the teacher, and it's about communicating what the criteria of success are. So what should students learn for, or how will they be able to succeed? Knowing what the criteria of success will enable the students in directing their learning efforts, in actually engaging in learning efforts. Also important in this approach is the question on feedback, meaning how often is feedback given and how is it given. So it would be very good if feedback were given rapidly. That means almost instantly after a certain performance. And it should be, of course, given in an appraising way, but also giving direct feedback on where that student is currently and where he could be heading. In that way, to enhance metacognitive strategies of the student, to enhance their self-direction. Another aspect of what really is necessary for effective teaching would be well-structured teaching, clear rules, but also classroom management. So how transparent are learning goals, for instance? That's a little bit along the line of the criteria of success in the first bucket, but it's a little bit different, as learning goals do not have to be linked to success goals or success criteria. They are more fluid, more of a process kind. Structuring helps divide the time, but also manage the multitude of students, the heterogeneity in the classroom, that kind of stuff. And the third criterion here, or the third group of strategies would be summarized under the topic of activating learning strategies. So whatever I do as a teacher, what works best is when students are actually enabled to learn by themselves. So the more I enable them, the better and the more effective their learning becomes. So as we see here, there have been no factors on mixed grouping, there has been nothing on class size. All of these factors apparently, at least in Hattie's study, did not affect achievement in students, but in fact it's the teachers that seem to be the key, and not so much external conditions or pedagogical arrangements. So what Hattie says at the end is that the teacher's mindset and their approach to teaching and to engaging with students is the most critical aspect. And he says, he advocates for teachers as activators as compared to teachers as facilitators. So for him, activators have clear learning intentions for the students, but also for themselves. They provide challenging success criteria, so it shouldn't be too easy to be successful. But it should also be possible once one has reached a certain success or has been successful in a certain area, that there should be continuous success levels for that student. So wherever that student is, he should always be challenged by the success criteria presented by the teacher. Also, teachers who are acting as activators or who see themselves as activators possess a range of learning strategies. They know different ways to learn, and they can also teach those different ways to learn to their students, depending on their students' characteristics, their students' individual propositions. Teachers who are activators also realize when students are not progressive. They are able to provide feedback at the right time and in the right mode, and they also visibly learn themselves. This goes in line with the reciprocal teaching approach. Those teachers who are activators, they both teach and learn from students, but also improve themselves all the time. Teachers who are activators, according to Hattie, have students who understand learning intentions, they know what they should learn, who are challenged by success criteria, students who know what they should learn and who know how to reach the next, or what the next step should be and what the criteria for successful reaching of that step will be. Those are challenged, and those will also be more willing to actually put an effort into learning. Students with activating teachers, according to Hattie, develop a range of learning strategies, and depending on the need of the subject at hand or the task at hand, they are able later on to pick the appropriate learning strategy. Those students also know when they are not progressing. They are able to assess their own standing and their own competencies. This is something about the metacognitive strategies that we've heard about before. These students also seek feedback from the teacher, from other students, to know where they are and where they need to go. And these students also are able to visibly teach themselves as a way of learning, teaching themselves but also teaching others. So, as Mr. William Arthur Ward says, and which is a little older than actually what Hattie found out, but it goes very well along and in line with the current results, is the mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, The superior teacher demonstrates. And finally, the great teacher inspires. This is something that Hattie also pronounced. Teachers as activators, this is not just a behavior, but it's a position and an outlook at this profession. And to come back to where we started off, what makes education good and what makes education successful is apparently whomever we meet in that classroom. And so educating good teachers, making teachers into activators is apparently the way to go for teaching with impact. And with that, I would like to thank you.